China's top legislature and political advisory body is gathering in Beijing, bringing together thousands of delegates to chart a new course for 2024. Hello, everyone. I'm Asiye Namdar in for Anna Naidu, and you're watching The Heat. It's China's biggest and most important event of the year. Two sessions will provide insight into Beijing's policy priorities, laying the blueprint for social and economic development for the year ahead. CGTN's Gao Ang reports on the opening day.
China's top political advisory body opened its annual session in Beijing on Monday afternoon. Wang Huning, chairman of the CPPCC National Committee, delivered a work report.
We will focus on enhancing the professionalism and representativeness of CPPCC members, creating conditions to help them understand the situation and become familiar with policies, promote in-depth consultation and interaction, and build broad consensus.
Wang also stressed on promoting high-quality development and green efforts, as well as boosting scientific and technological innovation.
We have conducted a series of surveys on optimizing the development environment for private enterprises, held special consultations on new urbanization construction, and promoting the stable and healthy development of the real estate market, and held 4 symposiums on macroeconomic situation analysis to help boost development confidence.
This year marks the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China and also the founding of the CPPCC. Officials said since the first session of the 14th CPPCC National Committee, more than 5,600 proposals on various topics have been put forward. Over 2,000 CPPCC members from different walks of life have gathered in Beijing. And during the next few days, they will be offering advice and pooling wisdom for advancing Chinese modernization and fulfilling national economic and social development goals. Gao Ang, CGTN at the Great Hall of People in Beijing.
Well, a lot to talk about. Let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Oregon, Liang is Chair Professor of Economics at Willamette University. From Shanghai, Josef Gregory Mahoney, Professor of Politics and International Relations at the East China Normal University in Shanghai. Here in Washington, D.C., Sourabh Gupta, a Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. And finally, in Beijing, Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Soochow University. Victor, let me begin with you. The significance of these 2 sessions, as our reporter mentioned, coming on the 75th anniversary of the founding of People's Republic of China. Perhaps you can give us some context for an international audience why 2 sessions is such a big deal.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, indeed, the 2 sessions in Beijing are going on as we speak, and the 2 sessions really are the highlights of the political life in China. The 2 sessions include, on the one hand, CPPCC session, which is not part of the legislature, and which is truly something extraordinary and unique to China. It predated the founding of the People's Republic of China. It predated the establishment of the China's National People's Congress. But ever since 1949, CPPCC has been really serving a very important purpose of bringing people from all walks of life together for consultation purposes. And it has been the Chinese tradition ever since 1949. Now, on the other hand, NPC, which is China's National People's Congress, it is the highest organ of state power in China. It is a real body with real power, appointing senior officials, for example, adopting legislatures, etc. But these 2 sessions, CPPCC session, which is consultative body, and the NPC normally take place at the same time. Now, it is important to note that for the members of the CPPCC, 60% or so of the members are not Communist Party members, meaning the overwhelming majority of the CPPCC members are non-Communist Party members. They are from the other 8 democratic parties in China, as well as people from all walks of life, professors, doctors, experts, entrepreneurs, and ordinary workers, for example. And they really bring different perspectives to the CPPCC, and they advise, they make proposals, sometimes they exercise supervision, and they work very closely with the government entities of all kinds. And this is very much part of what we call the consultative democracy in China with Chinese characteristics. Democracy in China is not confrontational or kind of a zero-sum game. It is very much based on consultation, understanding each other's positions, and try to bring them together to forge a consensus. On the other hand, the NPC, which is going on as we speak, is going to make major legislative progress and make major appointments to senior positions in China. And we expect to see very important reshuffling of key positions in the Chinese government. So we are here during this very exciting political period in Beijing, and everything that's happening at CPPCC on the one hand and the NPC on the other hand will be closely watched by everyone here in China and lots of countries in the world.
You know, one of the reasons 2 sessions will be closely watched is because so much focus will be on China's economy. China is the 2nd biggest economy in the world. And Liang, let me go to you. One of the most anticipated events, of course, is the government work report, which sets the GDP growth target for the year. It will be delivered by Premier Liang. Expected to address a variety of issues from youth unemployment, low birth rate, the future of tech, as well as artificial intelligence. What do you see coming out of this report?
Yeah, good to be with you, RCA. So you're right. I think, last year China grew at 5.2%, and that is, a great progress for China's economic recovery after the pandemic and the lockdown. But the world is watching for this year's China's growth target, because the consensus is that there are a lot of headwinds, a lot of challenges facing China's economy. And you mentioned some of these, such as youth unemployment, the real estate sector is still in adjustment, the local government debt issues, and so on and so forth. So I think most economists would expect the growth target would be set in the range between 4.5% to 5.5%, and it's very likely to be around 5%. That's because many of the provinces and municipalities, they have their own People's Congress in their local area, local levels, and the weighted average of their growth target was around 5.4%. So that means it's likely that 5% would be a reasonable range. And again, I think you're right. The work report will cover policies, and also the budget, right, will basically chart the course for this year's growth in terms of what policies will be put forth to support structural transformation, but also for the growth rates. And also other structural adjustments in the economy.
But do you expect to see any bold policy moves to give the economy a boost here?
Right. I don't think bold policies are very much expected. But again, I think it really depends on what you define that bold policies are. As you know, China's policymaking has been pragmatic and also gradual. And, they wanted to see how the policies work and make sure that we don't do the bazooka type of policies that could leave some of the long-term negative consequences. But it is likely the fiscal policy will remain proactive. Even if the headline deficit to GDP ratio may be kept still at 3 or 3.5% range, there could be still more, government special bond issuance, local government bond allowances that they are able to, increase their bond issuance. So all of these will be helpful. Monetary policy will remain, to be prudent. And I think there will be also policies that will support emerging technologies and industries. So all of these, I think, are very important to usher in, the kind of structural transformation. But I don't think there will be any sort of epic changing or making types of structural changes, big policies.
Joseph, do you agree with what Liang had to say in terms of no major bold policy initiatives? That's my first question to you. And then my second question is, I really want to also bring in this issue of, I mean, we hear it all the time, geopolitical tensions. How do you think that will play into the discussions at two sessions?
Well, I think Professor Yang is on the money there. I think the consensus is we'll expect to see something in the 5% range. Some international experts think that 4.5% is more realistic. 5.5 would require that they would have some very significant announcements either during the session or shortly thereafter, talking about subsidies or supports or stimulus packages. And I think the government has said that it's not interested in that type of big approach, that leads to more problems down the road. And certainly it gives markets that are rather sophisticated at this point opportunities to exploit those for short-term gains, which the government also wants to avoid. I think that in terms of geopolitics, my sense is that a lot of Chinese people this year, not speaking about the government per se, but a lot of Chinese people this year are focused more on economic recovery. They're more focused on domestic issues. Certainly people, still have an interest in what's happening in Hong Kong. They're concerned and expressing sympathy for the situation in Gaza. But when I talk to people, for example, about U.S.-China relations, the main focus is which way the U.S. might go with interest rates, which way the U.S. might go with policies that are targeting Chinese industries like EVs. So it's less about sort of the global geostrategic perspective, with the exception of when it directly deals with the economy.
Interesting. Well, Sourabh, you and I have discussed China so many times live on the air, China's economy, China's progress. How do you think the world, especially the global south, how are they watching all of this unfolding in Beijing?
They're watching in terms of trying to see China, how it is facing very difficult challenges, not insurmountable challenges. These are challenges which can be tackled, but they require serious structural reform and willpower, and will, of course, take time to do. But I think the global south will be watching to see how China goes about its processes. China has talked about every country owning their own modernization, and the global south has bought into this, considering and seeing China's success. And therefore, there isn't one template of how you do it. Every country seeks its own template based on its own social systems and methods. And that is one area they will be focusing on, is how China makes that structural transition and transformation from being more an investment-centered economy to a more domestic, consumption-focused, services-driven, advanced manufacturing economy. And from that perspective, I think it's very important for them, because at one point of time, the Chinese domestic market is really a market to which they wish to export many of their goods. Many of those goods which are produced using Belt and Road funds and Belt and Road created infrastructure they hope will also be at some point of time exported to China. So China is an important growth motor for regional and the international economy, and for the global south in particular. And when I say that, I must also say that China has now become a great investment superpower too. So China takes its infrastructure managerial skills and know-how to these countries, and given China's standing and proficiency in many of these new frontier industries, we talk about solar, EV, etc., China could one day really stimulate the growth motors in these countries. So they will be watching how China goes about tackling its own challenges, and what that tackling and that structural transformation might mean for their own economic opportunities in the future.
Victor, I'm going to veer off course a little bit and ask you a question about some unexpected news that the Western media is really jumping on, and I want to just get your reaction on that. A spokesperson for the NPC Liu Qingjian revealed that Premier Li would not give the regular news conference at the close of NPC, really scrapping a long-standing tradition which has been in place for the past 30 years. What do you make of it? Is this significant? Because clearly, based on what we're reading in The Guardian, Wall Street Journal, and Western news organization, they're making a big deal out of this.
Well, the tradition for the Chinese premier to conduct a press conference immediately after the conclusion of the annual NPC session was established in 1988, and it has been a big tradition ever since then. Therefore, for that tradition to be terminated at this year's NPC session is something of surprise to everyone, including me. However, the decision is even more than just the cancellation of this year's premier's cancellation press conference, because it says in the coming few years there will no longer be premier's press conference after the conclusion of the NPC session. Now, you need to figure out what's the reason behind the termination of this tradition. Maybe it is related to the fact that this year's NPC session and the CPPC session has been significantly reduced to sometimes more than 2 weeks to 10 days, and now it's about 6 days. It's about a week. That means that China probably is very, very busy and focused on really getting things done very quickly, because we are really faced with a lot of headwind. You mentioned the geopolitical headwinds as well as domestic headwinds, etc. So more on the hand job need to be done, and that's probably one reason why the sessions themselves in terms of the length have been reduced, and then in terms of this premier's press conference it has been terminated. Now, whether that will be replaced by something else, for example, top leaders one-on-one press conference with other news agencies, both domestic or international, I do not know.
Well, Victor, let me interrupt you for 1 second. Let me just interrupt you for 1 second, because Liu Qingjian, in making this news, also said there will be more briefings by other government ministers instead on issues ranging from diplomacy, the economy, and people's livelihoods. So it sounds like while the premier's news conferences may not happen, others by other government minister might.
Indeed. My personal view is that the greater transparency for the Chinese decision makers, the more opportunities for the top leaders to talk directly to the media, both domestic and international, the better. How this result can be achieved is really very technical as well as strategic, and I hope there will be more chances for the ministers, for the other top leaders, etc., to talk directly to the media, to have interviews, etc. And this will help make the whole decision-making process in China more transparent for the Chinese people as well as for international audience. This, I hope, will continue to be the mega trend, and the termination of the premier's press conference, while regrettable in my best judgment, hopefully will not divert from this mega trend of making China's top decision-making process more transparent. Therefore, let's get all our attention focused on everything that's happening during the two sessions.
Okay.
And there will be lots of such press conferences in the coming few days.
All right, so we're going to get to the meat at hand, if you will. And let me turn to Yan Liang. Yan Liang, we keep hearing the phrase new productive forces in China's policymaking. What does that even mean? Please explain it to us.
Right. So I think what President Xi Jinping, he put forth this phrase, the new productive force, when he examined Heilongjiang province late last year. And so what he mentioned is that this is the necessary element to promote the so-called high-quality development. As we know, this is about innovation-driven, inclusive, sustainable development. So this new productive forces would involve new emerging technologies, new industries, talking about data as a necessarily important ingredient, as a productive input. And also this idea that we're going to leverage on these high-tech sectors such as new energies, high-end equipment, biotech, and so on, to promote technological innovations and productivity-driven growth. And with this kinds of new technologies, new productivities would also come, new organizations, new structures, new scale. And so, again, the idea is that, some of the traditional sectors, the traditional forces of production are no longer suitable for China to graduate out of the, so-called middle income trap. And we need to develop new sectors, new technologies, and new driving forces in order to promote the high quality growth going forward.
Joseph, you certainly bring a very unique perspective to this discussion. You're an American professor teaching in China. What are you seeing among your students that you teach? How important is technology? How important is innovation? How closely are they watching 2 sessions? And what do you think is this generation ready for the explosion of artificial intelligence?
Well, that's a lot of questions there. One of the interesting things, of course, is that I teach the Marxism seminar, one of the Marxism seminars at East China Normal University, and when I hear the term new productive forces, of course, I'm listening to that from a Marxist point of view, and it does have a legacy, a Marxist legacy, when we talk about productive forces and how these drive economic development and national development. So that's point one, and that's something we'll be discussing in class tomorrow. Another thing that ECNU is on the cutting edge of right now is using AI in the classroom to help instruct classes. And this is something that we're very interested here in Shanghai, but also it's something that, as Yang Laoshi was pointing out, this idea that we need to take these new technological breakthroughs that can spur greater productivity and bring them into things like state-owned enterprises that have seen their productivity fall as they've had to expand capacity in recent years to help cover certain economic problems. And so this is something that the government is hoping will help bring these back to higher productivity and certainly help rectify some of the needs in the economy, including solidifying the recovery. As for what people are concerned about, I think young people see the world in a very different way. They're still very much concerned about things like international peace. They're concerned about things like climate change. Of course, they're also concerned about whether or not they'll have a job when they graduate and whether or not they'll be able to afford housing. And these are issues that are certainly things that we expect the MPC to talk about this week and that we'll be talking about in the classroom as we move forward.
Victor, let's talk about the 14th five-year plan, which I can assure you most people in the Western world are not familiar with this. So talk a little bit about that, how important this is, and also has China met most of its goals and objectives? Granted, it still has a little bit of time.
Thank you very much. The five-year plan system in China started in the early 1950s and has always been a major planning session and cycle for the Chinese economic development. It means that from the Chinese perspective, the whole country need to look forward, at least for the coming 5 years. And then coupled with the five-year plan period, we also have medium and longer term. That's even longer cycle, is that right? So we cannot just afford to plan for the coming year. We need to plan for the coming year in the framework of the five-year plan. And then the five-year plan cycle also need to be put in the overall medium and longer term planning period. Now, this brings focus to what the nation really wants to achieve. It really helps channel all the resources in China to the more urgent tasks facing the nation. Now, for the 14th planning five-year plan, I think it happens when China is in a really very important transformative transition period, because as you mentioned, China is really facing with lots of headwinds, both domestically and internationally, and the whole mankind, the whole Homo species now is faced with the opportunities and the challenges created by this AI revolution. I would say AI revolution will completely transform everything that human beings are accustomed in terms of our lifestyle, of our traditions, values, etc. Elon Musk even called AI the new species, which may actually, if not handled properly, replace Homo sapien as the dominant species in the world. Therefore, I think we are still in the middle of this 14th five-year plan cycle, and the NPC this year, CPPCC session this year, are a very important part of that. And I truly believe that China probably is better positioned than any other country in facing the opportunities and the challenges of the AI revolution. And we want to cooperate with all the countries in the world. We do not want to face with the headwind of some countries trying to divide the world into different opposing blocks.
Victor, I have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry because we have so little time left, and I want to make sure everybody has can contribute as we end our conversation. But I understand what you're saying. Sourabh, and this is a question for all of you as we wrap up our discussion. But let me begin with you, Sourabh. If you're a foreign investor, what kind of signals do you want to hear from two sessions? Sourabh, you first.
Yeah. As a foreign investor, I want to see that China is going for growth. Structural reform takes time. I want to see that the central government understands it, which they do. They laid out a lot of measures for foreign investment last August. I want to see that China is still focused on growth, as the Chinese government itself has said. Let's establish first whether breaking down before doing reform. They want to see the growth motor started, and the challenges, underlying challenges that the Chinese government faces economically being tackled step by step.
Okay, very quickly. Joseph, fast, quick, please.
Yeah, I think that in the international community, there's a lot of talk that China values securitization more than growth. And I think that if the MPC can communicate that securitization is where it needs to be, that we don't need to see more bigger security efforts, that would reassure investors that China is a good place to come.
Liang, 10 seconds.
Right. I think it will be helpful to really deliver the support for private enterprises, as well as supporting domestic demand, and also approaches with stabilized relationship with the West and also cooperation with the South.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you all for a very interesting discussion. I'm Asiye Namdar in Washington, D.C. Thank you for watching another edition of The Heat.